Okay, we are back in 1 Peter. Y'all didn't think I was ever coming back, did you? We've been off of 1 Peter for about 2 or 3 Sundays, so we're going to come back to 1 Peter, and we're going to be in chapter 4, verses 17, 18, and 19. 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 17, 18, and 19. And this is what it says. For the time is come that judgment must begin at the house of God. And if it first begin at us, what shall the end be of them that obey not the gospel of God? And if the righteous scarcely be saved, where shall the ungodly and the sinner appear? Wherefore, let them that suffer accordingly to the will of God commit the keeping of their souls to him in well-doing as unto a faithful Creator. Okay, look back at verse 17. Verse 17 says, for the time is come that judgment must begin at the house of God. Now, what does Peter mean by the house of God? Judgment begins at the house of God. Well, the house of God, he's talking about God's family. He's talking about God's children. He's talking about God's sons. He's talking about God's daughters. When somebody asks you, said, how's things going at home? What do they mean? They won't know. They're talking about your whole family, right? How's things going? How's your mom and daddy doing? You know, when they say, how's things at home? How's your wife, your husband doing? How your kids doing? They won't know how everybody under your roof is doing. So, when Peter is talking about it, he's talking about God's family. He's talking about God's children. And Peter is telling us that the time is going to come when judgment is going to begin with us. Judgment is going to begin with the house of God. It's going to begin with his children. Now, verse 17 says that judgment must begin, or judgment must start at the house of God. Now, judgment is going to come for all people, right? But it's going to begin with us. It's going to begin with God's children. And why is that? Why do you think it's going to begin with us? Because we would think, looks like, since he's our father, he might show us a little more mercy. Maybe we should be last, or maybe, he would take care of everything else as far as judgment goes for us. But why? Why is God going to judge his household first? Well, it's because the Bible, all throughout the Bible, it teaches in scriptures, like in the book of Luke, chapter 12, verse 48, it says, from everyone who has been given much, much will be required. And from the one who have been entrusted with much, even more is going to be expected. So the people of God's house has been given much. The people of God's house has been blessed. You and I, his children, being blessed. We have more privileges than those who are not of the house of God. We have a lot of privileges because we are God's children. So since God has given the children of his house so many privileges and so many blessings, then you know what? More is expected of us. It's like I'm sure when you was raising your kids at one time or another, that, the subject may come up, well, everybody else is doing it. And what do you tell them? You're not everybody else. You're not everybody else. You're my children. So you see, that's the same way that's what God's talking about here. God expects more out of us. You know why? Because we're his children. My daddy started entrusting me with a lot of privileges at a very, very young age, because he worked out of town a lot and he could only come home on weekends. So when I was a kid, I had privileges or chores or whatever you may call them, that a lot of kids my age didn't have. I remember when I was 15 years old, Daddy told me, he said, Monday, I want you to load the horses up in the horse trailer and take them to Geiger and get shoes put on. Now I'm 15 years old. And things like that he trusted me with. He would tell, I would train his horses. I'd work his bird dogs. I was, even as a 13-year-old, I was planting corn, plowing peas, working in the hayfield, working on tractors, doing all those things. And it's simply because that's what I lived on in Daddy's house, and that was some of and at the time they were privileges to me. I wanted to do those things. And I just couldn't believe that he would trust me with so much stuff. And if I messed up, and if I did something wrong, well, he didn't like it. You know why? Because I'm of his household. I'm of his household. He didn't care whatever all the other kids 13 years old was doing. He cared about what I was doing. And if I messed up, I heard about it. Talking about driving without license, I did mess up more than once. and some of you may remember, I think it was in 1972, coming down Mr. Sellers Hill. We were, a bunch of us was camping out back up in your pasture somewhere back up there. Me and Mike Sellers and Bobo Stevens and Ronnie and Ray and Hubert, and I don't remember how many of us was camping out back there. And Hubert had an old school bus he made a camper out of. Well, Ronnie had like a 70 model Comet with a 3-speed on the column. And me and somebody, I forgot who it was going to get something because I didn't have a driver's license. And when I was coming down that hill, I caught second gear and it got sideways and I hit 3 pine trees.
Oh.
Coming down that hill on the left-hand side right there. Now, Daddy wasn't proud of me about that. You know why? Because he expected more of me than that. He expected more of me than that because I lived in his house. Because, that I'm his son. And so much was expected of me. And because he entrusted me with so many privileges, I did my best to try to do right, to do the right thing when I could. And so it is with the children of God's house. He's entrusted us with a lot. Mm-hmm. God has given us a lot of privileges. And he wants us to do them. And he wants us to take care of them. And he wants us to do a good job of it. But you know why? Because he's been good to us. He's been good to us. And the greatest privilege that God has ever given us is the privilege and the honor of being responsible for telling the gospel message. Now think about that for a minute. The gospel message is the greatest message that's ever been told in the history of this world. The gospel message is the most important message that will ever be told and that has ever been told. And God has entrusted you to deliver that. The most important message in the world. I mean, this message of the gospel, it can decide where your family and friends spend eternity. This gospel message can decide whether they go to heaven or hell. I mean, this is a huge, huge responsibility and privilege that God has given me and you. And he has entrusted us with the most important message in the world. Now, just let that sink in for a minute. God could have used angels if he wanted to. Angels, they're messengers of God anyhow, right? I wonder why God, we're not going to do a good job. Why didn't you just choose your angels and let your angels come down here and spread your gospel? Why in the world would you trust that with me? Why in the world would he trust that with you? Why didn't he just send the angels down here to do that? Well, God could just snap his fingers and everybody would know the gospel. But God decided to use you, and he decided to use me to do that. And listen, that's one of the most amazing things in the world. And that is a privilege and an honor to be trusted with that. I remember that Sunday night that Daddy told me to carry them horses to Geiger, and I wasn't even old enough to have a driver's license. I remember that. I can remember it like it was yesterday. And the reason why I remember it is because I was just blown away with how much faith he had in me. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe that he would do that. I couldn't believe the things that Daddy would let me do. I remember you remember back when Warrior Academy first started, the homecoming dances and all was at Bowling Jeep. Some of y'all remember that? And since it was back roads, I would drive that little Opel Kadett we had when I was 14 years old. I'd drive the Bowling Jeep. You know, and so I was just blown away that Daddy would just trust me with these things, even though I wasn't old enough to do it. I mean, but you know what? He did it because he believed in me. Well, listen, the most important message in the world is the gospel. It's the gospel. It changes lives. And God believes in you to get the word out. He could have used angels to spread the gospel. He could have done it himself. He could have just made people so they automatically will go to it. But God had enough faith in you and in me to say, I'm gonna let you be the one to spread the gospel. People's lives depend on us. I mean, that's a huge burden. I mean, if you think about it, that's a huge weight to carry. That's a large load to carry. Knowing that I'm responsible, knowing that you are responsible for the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's just awesome. I mean, but because so many privileges has been given us, then much more is expected of us. Okay? God expects us. How many times have I stood up here and told you that if we do our part, God's always faithful to do his part? You know, he's got it. It's our marching orders. That's what he wants us to do. Tell the gospel. So when Daddy gave me those privileges, I was determined not to let him down. And so listen, folks, believe me, God believes in you. He knows that you can do it. And he knows that you can get this message out. And because God believes in you that much, we should be more determined. You know, when Daddy gave me all them privileges that I was too young to do, I was determined that I was going to do it right. I was determined that I was going to be careful. I was determined that I wasn't going to wreck. I was determined that I was going to do the right thing and not let him down. But spreading the gospel, it scares a lot of people. And we talked about this at our Sunday school lesson day, went right along with this of excuses why people are not obedient to the Lord when it comes to doing his work or spreading the gospel. And the excuses that we have sometimes, and the reason, and some of them are legit. A lot of people are very scared to go out there and spread the gospel because they don't know what to say. They're not sure about what they say. They think, well, I don't know the Bible well enough. You know, I'm kind of embarrassed to say anything. Or maybe I'm a brand new Christian and you know, I don't even feel comfortable talking to them about it. Or maybe I don't really, you know, I just don't have the confidence of being able to tell somebody about the gospel. So there's a lot of reasons why people get scared when it comes to telling the gospel of Jesus Christ. But listen, God knows that, okay? God knows what you are capable of. God knows what you can and can't do. So listen, if you don't like talking in front of people, if you don't like confronting people with the gospel, if you don't feel comfortable with that, well, guess what? God has made a way for you to do it without saying a word. God has made a way for you to spread the gospel message without saying a single word. And all you have to do is live the gospel in front of them. Live the gospel in front of them. That's all you got to do. And so you see, that's how you spread the gospel. That's how you can do it without saying a single word. You know, I'll say something. I don't mind telling people about Jesus. It don't bother me. I like telling people about Jesus. I wish somebody would have told me about Jesus way earlier than they did, because I didn't find him until I was 35 years old. So listen, I don't mind telling people about Jesus, but some people are timid about doing that. So the best way that you can do it is just living in front of them. You know, do you realize that every day of your life, you are preaching a message to someone? Now, what kind of message that is, I don't know. But remember this. Every day of your life, you are preaching a message to someone. Someone's watching. Someone's paying attention. And just for a little side note, those of you that are on Facebook, be careful with the pictures you put on. Examine your pictures before you put them on there. Okay? Examine your pictures before you put them on there. Because, you know, like I said, the way you live your life preaches to other people. You know, so pay attention, all right? Pay attention. Look in the background. Look what's on the table. Look around. Look at your pictures before you put them on Facebook. All right? Do those. Be careful with that. Because if the people pay attention to the way we live, the things we do. They pay attention to the decisions we make, and they even pay attention to your attitude. If you have a good or a bad attitude, your outlook on life. And so everything that we do sends a message to someone. Someone's watching, someone's looking. You know, your life is the only Bible that a lot of people will ever read. How many times have you heard that? It is so true. Your life is the only Bible that some people will ever read. A lot of responsibility has been given to us. The gospel, the most important message in the world. God has entrusted me and you to do that. And with this great responsibility comes judgment. And if we have lived a life that has not brought glory to God, what are we going to be judged for? Judgment's going to, as that verse says, judgment's going to begin at the house of God. So if God's going to judge his own house, like it says in verse 17, if God's going to judge his own house, what about those that are not saved? What about them? All right, look at verse 17. And if it first begin at us, what shall the end be of them that obey not the gospel of God? And then look what verse 18 says. And if the righteous scarcely be saved, where shall the ungodly and the sinner appear? Let me read that one more time. If the righteous scarcely be saved, where shall the ungodly and the sinner appear? So what does he mean by that when he says, if the righteous scarcely be saved? What does it mean? Well, it's kind of this way. I barely made it, folks. I barely made it. God started working in my life. God started getting my attention when I was probably about 12 years old. I went to a revival at Forkland Methodist Church, and I went forth. And I said the sinner's prayer and asked God to save me and all that stuff. But you know what? I don't believe I got saved. And the reason I don't believe that is because I didn't have a life-changing experience. I didn't change. I was still doing the same old things I've always did. You know, there's a lot of people who come to the altar and all they did is come to the altar and say something, but there has to be a life-changing experience, okay? Just because you say the sinner's prayer, just say you ask God to forgive you of your sins, and then you say, God, come into my life and save you, well then, that'll work if it comes from the heart. But if it don't come from the heart, well then your life's not going to change. If it comes from the heart, then you'll see a difference. So there was no evidence in my life that I was saved. None at all. Because I didn't change the way I lived. And when I got older, you know, I lived a life of drugs and alcohol. I mean, that's what I did for many, many years. And my middle name was Party. I come from a partying family. If any of y'all know my relatives, you know that. I come from a family that's loved to party as far back as I can remember. And during that time when I was living that way, I could tell you many, many stories of why I should not be here today. There's been a lot of things that happened in my life during those times, from Miami, Florida to Duluth, Minnesota, and everywhere in between that I've been, that I should not be here today. There's been a lot of those things that happened, and a lot of them, and listen, I'm not proud of them and I'm not bragging, but there's a lot of stories that I shouldn't be here. And if I would have died during that time, I'd be in hell right now. Whew, that's a scary thought. So you know what? I scarcely made it. I scarcely made it. But at the age of 35, you know, my life hit rock bottom. I didn't have nowhere else to turn. So I finally turned to Jesus Christ. And when I did that, he changed my life. But I'm going to tell you something, folks. I scarcely made it. I barely made it. I mean, it could have been too late. But praise the Lord, you know, I got saved. And it was a life-changing experience. There was evidence. There was evidence that there's a difference. I scarcely made it, but I did make it, okay? I scarcely made it, but I did. So, if you're not a Christian, and if I scarcely made it and you're not a Christian, well, how do you think you're going to make it? Mm-hmm. How do you think you're going to make it if I scarcely made it? So there's only one way. There's only way. In the book of John, chapter 14 and verse 6 says this. Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man cometh. No man, listen, I don't care how good you are. I don't care if you're a good old boy or a good old gal. I don't care if you're the best person in the community. I don't care if you give me the shirt off your back. I don't care if you're the nicest person that I've ever met. There's only one way to the Father. Let me read that again. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and life. And no man cometh unto the Father but by me, Jesus said. But by me. Okay, look at verse 19. Verse 19 says, wherefore, let them that suffer accordingly to the will of God commit the keeping of their souls to him in well-doing as unto a faithful Creator. Okay, notice the word commit. The word commit there. The original meaning for that word commit is a banking term. It's a banking term. It means to make a deposit into a secure place. To commit means to make a deposit into a secure place. So when you put money in the bank, you believe it's going to be in a safe place, right? That's why you put it in there, to be in a safe place. You commit your money, or you make a secure deposit into the bank, and you do it for safekeeping. So look, with that in mind, look what verse 19 says again. Knowing that word commit is a banking term, and it means to make a secure deposit. Verse 19 says, wherefore, let them that suffer according to the will of God commit or make a secure deposit the keeping of their souls to him in well-doing as unto a faithful Creator. You see, in my life journey, I scarcely made it to become a Christian. And the day that happened, the day that I did become a Christian, I committed everything to Jesus. I made a deposit. When I got saved, when I had a life-changing experience, I made a deposit. And I committed my life to Jesus Christ. So my question is to you and everybody, have you made a deposit? Have you made a commitment to Jesus Christ? Have you done that yet? So, listen, you may have a safety deposit box in a bank. You may have a safe at your house where you keep all your valuables. And you do that because you want it to be in a secure place, right? And when you go out of town, you feel secure, right? When you sleep at night, you can sleep good because you know that your valuables are in a safe place. And you know what? When I went to bed last night, I slept good. You know what? Because my soul is in a safe place. I slept good last night because I made a deposit. I made a deposit. I committed my life to Jesus Christ. And because of that, it is in a safe place. It's in safekeeping. So listen, I didn't worry about my soul because I made a deposit 30 years ago. 30 years ago, I made a deposit, and it's still drawing interest. It's still drawing interest today. My soul's in a safe place. So what about you? Have you given your life to Jesus Christ? Have you made that deposit? And are you ready to tell the message? All right? We've got our marching orders, okay? God has entrusted me and you to tell the greatest message in the world to God. Are you ready to do that? If you're not ready to do it verbally, are you ready to live it in front of them? Are you ready to make that kind of commitment? Now, that's a life-changing commitment right there. To live it in front of them, that is a commitment. What's that story about the chicken and the hog walking down the street? They're going to donate breakfast. He said, I give the eggs and you give the bacon. He said, hey, for you it's just a donation, but for me it's a commitment. You know, so listen, if you want to preach the gospel in front of people by the way you live, that is a commitment, because some changes have to take place. You know, just changes have to take place for you to do that. Because everything that you do, everywhere you go, everything you post, everything you say, you're preaching to someone. Someone you're preaching to. So, listen, we got a lot of work here to do at Beulah Baptist Church. We got a lot of work to do. And the main job is telling the gospel. The main job is putting out the good news. And as we try to get this work done here at the church, we need workers. We need workers. You know, the Lord said that the field is plentiful. The field is white. But we need workers. And He said, pray that you will send workers to gather this harvest. So listen, if any of you are interested in becoming a part of this family of believers called Beulah Baptist Church, we'd love to have you. We'd love to have you join our church, be a part of it, and help us to do this. God's gave us marching orders. He's gave Beulah Baptist Church our marching orders, and we need some soldiers. We need some foot soldiers to get out there and get her done, as they say. You know, so we need your help. So if you're looking for a church family, or if you're looking in a place where you can roll up your sleeves and go to work, this is the place. This is the place for you, and we'd love to have you. And listen, and if you're not where you used to be in your spiritual life, today would be a good day to rededicate your life to the Lord. Rededicate and say, hey, I am ready to make that commitment. I'm ready to make that commitment to live it. Now, listen, I know everybody here loves the Lord and interested in the Lord and wants to serve because you're here, right? You're here. You come every Sunday. So, why not give it that extra push? Excuse me, why not give it that extra step and go on and cross that line and make a commitment? There's so many people that's drawn a line in the sand and they're scared to get over it. I'm not going to cross that line. You know, this is how far I'm going to go in my spiritual life. Zip, I draw a line in the sand. I'm not going beyond that point. Hey, that sand can easily be erased. You can do it with your toe. You can smooth it out just like that. And all you got to do is step over and just make that commitment and make that decision. Because none of us are getting any younger, are we? And this judgment is going to begin where?
Here.
In God's house with His children. It's going to start with us. And the reason why judgment is going to begin with us, because where much is given, much is expected. God's been really, really good to us. God's blessed us all in a special way. God has given us a lot of privileges. So therefore, more is expected out of us. And the one thing that He expects is to tell His gospel by word and by action. That's what He wants. So it is my prayer that all of us, starting with me, all of us will examine ourselves, okay? We need to examine ourselves. We need to look at our life And we need to put everything else on hold for a minute. We're busy, right? Is there anybody here that is not busy? Everybody's busy. Everybody is, everything in this world is competing for your time. Everything in this world is trying to jockey into place to get your time, you know, and it seems like there's not enough time in the day. So just for a moment, put the brakes on everything, okay? Let's say, right now, all this stuff I got to do, I'm going to take an eraser and I'm going to erase it. I feel better already. I got that load off me already. Sure, I'm going to have to take it back up again in the morning, but right now I got that load off of me. It's gone. So now that I have that load off of me, what does God want me to do? And here's the problem that we have. We want to try to fit God in. And we struggle with that. Listen, I've been there. I have tried to fit God in. You know, you got the things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Your list goes. Your list of things you're doing. I got to do this. I want to live this way. I got to spend time doing this. I enjoy doing this. I got to do this. Where can I put God? Where am I going to put God at? And God's out here. And we have not made the commitment of where to put him. You know why? Because we feel bad about putting him down here somewhere. Because you know God's got to go number one. Listen, if God's not in first place, everything else is going to be out of place. You know, if God's not in first place, your finances is not going to be right. Your marriage is not going to be right. Your health is not going to be right. Your sanity is not going to be right. Your peace is not going to be right. Because you got all them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're all out of order. Because one should be God. And then everything else is in its place. Once God is in its place, everything else falls into place. But when we're trying to fit God in, then everything's out of place. You know why we can't manage our time? Because we can't find nowhere to put it. We can't find anywhere to put God. So we can't manage our time. Here's the crazy thing about mathematics in the Bible. It's the craziest thing you ever seen. In order to get more, you give. Give it away. Isn't that crazy? If you want forgiveness, what do you got to give? Forgiveness. If you want love, what have you got to give? Love. And I don't want to run nobody off, but if you want money, what do you got to give? Money. Okay? If you want time, what have you got to give? Time. God has to answer. He has to answer. I don't know. My life is so full. My life is so full, I don't have time to do anything. Do you need more time? You know what you got to give to get it? Time. Isn't it crazy? The world doesn't understand that. The world thinks that the more I get, the more I keep, the more I take in, the more I'm going to have. But it don't work that way with God. God's always been just opposite from the world. Because the world don't think like God thinks. So with God, whatever you want, give it away. That's crazy, isn't it? Whatever you want, give it away. You know, I didn't think I had time. Listen, when I started preaching when I accepted the call to ministry when I was 40 years old. When I was 40 years old, I worked anywhere from 40 to 70 hours a week with McAfee. I had a KO salad shop. I was working on salads at night and on Saturdays and Sunday evenings and pastoring the church. All at the same time. And I thought, how can I do that? I can do that. Okay, I'm going to give more time to the Lord. And that don't even make sense, does it? How's that going to give me more time to work on those salads? How's that going to give me more time to do all I need to do within construction work? How's that going to give me more time to rest? Because God's way don't work the way that the world does, so you give it away. Whatever you want, give it away. So I was able to do it. I was able to manage it. And so can you. If you need time, give it away. Give it away, and you'll have it. We're going to give a hymn of invitation. And if you are ready to make a deposit, if you're ready to make a deposit today, then listen, the interest is out of this world. The interest is in heaven, and our souls will be in a secure place. Let's go to the Lord in prayer.